It is time for a new tier list video as we just had a patch, and of course also we have a new Pokemon in Psyduck. Today we'll be placing every single Pokemon again, and then also talk a bit about the placements and how they currently do in the meta. At the top we have the top and bot path tier list, and on the right, bottom right, we have the Centraria tier list. Again, I have to split them apart, otherwise placing a Pokemon doesn't make all too much sense. So let's get started. I will be placing every single Pokemon at the same time. First up, we have Venusaur, which I think is quite okay. Solar Beam, Sludge Bomb is definitely a strong build, but besides that, I think it's pretty much in the middle. Like B pluses, you know, they still can be played, they can win games a good amount. B is also still fine to pick. Those are Pokemon, if you're good at them, you can definitely carry games. S plus are currently the best ones, of course. A plus are very close to the best ones. A are very solid meta Pokemon. And then B plus is almost meta, but not quite, just missing a tiny bit of thing. So anything in B, or like in B or B plus, you can still play and carry games with if you know what you're doing on this Pokemon. C is borderline griefing, and D is absolutely griefing. Definitely. In Centraria, I feel like Venusaur has dropped off a good amount. I have no B plus here because I feel like it's not that necessary because there's less Pokemon in Centraria that we have to consider, so we can skip an entire tier. So I'm going to put into B right here, as it has lost a lot of power there as well. In general, you only want to have really one attacker Pokemon currently in your team if you want to play meta, because attacker Pokemon do struggle a good amount. Next up, we have Gengar. I would say Gengar in Path can be beat here in solo queue. If you're more coordinated play, so let's say 3 stacks or 5 stacks, it's definitely down here or down here. But if you play solo queue, definitely a B tier Pokemon, I would say. And in Centraria, I mean, I think a solid A or A plus definitely works. I think it's not quite A plus or S, but A should be totally fine. There's just certain matchups that are quite difficult. And of course, Gengar does take a bit amount of skill to play, unless you play Hex. Hex is pretty decent. I think this right here as well, like this is for Hex, and for Dream Eater Shadow Ball, I would put into C tier when it comes to top and bot path. I personally like Mr. Mime a lot. Very strong laning phase, of course, not a Centraria Pokemon, so don't have to consider it right here. Next up, we have Snorlax, which I think is a solid B plus as well. Definitely could be A tier. I think Flail and Block in solo queue is quite good. Heavy Slam and Yawn in tournaments also sees a good amount of play. But I don't know if I want to put it necessarily above other Defender, but Snorlax, if you enjoy Defender Pokemon, is 100% something you can play. I think Gardevoir was quite solid, also B plus when it comes to, you know, laning phase. I think in Jungle it's a bit higher, even though, again, you don't really necessarily want to have currently attacker Pokemon in Centraria too much. It still does a lot when Gardevoir gets going. Absol in Path, sadly, is very bottom tier. Gengar, I think, just has more potential to like get one-shots and back in the game, which Absol can do as well. But I don't know, man. I feel like Absol just wants to run around the map and do as much as possible and doesn't really want to be bound towards being stuck in top and bot path. And in Centraria, definitely, it's actually maybe even almost A plus tier. I think currently Absol is actually quite a good Pokemon, but I think A is still a bit more fair. I'm personally a big fan of Garchomp. To me, easily A when it comes to top and bot path, and even I always would say he's A plus in Centraria. I know Garchomp is very underrated, and I always put them much higher than other players I think would, but the win rates that show that Garchomp is always a decent Pokemon and definitely should be considered to be at the top 50% of Pokemon. Next up, Lucario. We've seen him pop up a lot in tournaments again, but I think for the average player, I think B plus is maybe still a bit more fair, but Lucario definitely, again, these love plays, so if you enjoy playing Lucario, go ahead, you can definitely do a lot with this Pokemon and get a lot done. So like maybe even, I mean, honestly, maybe it's even A tier, but I think B plus, of course, this is like, this matters for 90% of the player base, and Lucario being like A or A plus is like for 1% maybe, you know, so I still want my tier list to be for 90% of the player base, and of course in Centraria, we are not going to play Lucario at all. Within top and bot path, I'm actually going to finally put out of the D tier and put into C, just because you do get level 7 quite fast, but again, this is still borderline trolling, right? Like in C, you still shouldn't really be picking them. And in Centraria, I actually think you can just quite decent right now, putting into A. Again, still an attacker though, so if you have too many attacker, maybe pick something else instead. Talonflame is one of the better lane speedsters, I think deserves speed here. And he's also quite annoying, also A when it comes to Centraria. Charizard has fallen a lot, and really doesn't, I pretty much never see people play Charizard currently. And definitely when it comes to top and bot path, one of the worst Pokemon to play, just takes so long to really scale. I think in Centraria might still be a solid A or B, No, I don't want to put it lower, really. I think maybe B tier, though. I really haven't seen Charizard get work done much. Like, you really notice the nerf a good amount. Next up, we have Zeraora, which I actually like a lot. It's top and bot path, it's still not, of course, in the top half, I would say. But I feel like in central area, I do think that Zeraora, now with the buffs as well, has an easy chance to be an A+ Pokemon. This could still change over the next few weeks, of course, depending on how this patch plays out. But I like it a lot. Much more survivability, lower cooldowns, which really clutch a lot more moments. I wouldn't be surprised if its win rate goes up by like at least 1 or 2% with those buffs. I like them a lot, and I had already had crazy games with it. Cinderace is not escaping the jail when it comes to top and bot path. And man, it's really hard to understand if Cinderace got nerfed or buffed, because it's so hard to understand how much defense and special defense in Unite do, and them just getting a bit more doesn't really matter too much. So I'm gonna put Cinderace maybe into B. They did nerf Blaze Kick by 1 entire second, and in general, basic attack, auto attack Pokemon that are ranged are difficult. There's so many speedsters that just run you down, and it's honestly just always better to have a bit of burst damage, right? Greninja has burst damage, the Gardevoir has burst. I mean, Gardevoir is not basic attack Pokemon, but Greninja has burst. Garchomp is a basic attack Pokemon, but he has a lot of burst with its Unite. And Pyro Ball, yes, Pyro Ball has burst, but at the end, Pyro Ball is just not that great of a move. Cramorant has fallen down a lot since the nerfs to Dive. I think I still don't want to put him into COD tier though, because I think it's still better than that. But definitely B when it comes to here, and also maybe actually, so I think B tier should still be quite fair for Cram. Pikachu, very annoying of a Pokemon, gotta put into A right here. Central area, can't recommend playing Pikachu in central area. Definitely goes down to D tier with Lucario. I skipped off some Pokemon. Wait, let me see. Crustle. I think Crustle is fine. A solid B+ tier. It has seen much more play. Lately, it hasn't seen all too much play, but it's still, of course, quite a solid Pokemon. Eldegoss is easy S or A+, but I think I'm going to put it into A+ for now. Of course, not a central area Pokemon, but honestly, Eldegoss central area is something you could play. I sometimes play it. It's actually pretty fun if you play Leaf Tornado and Cotton Spore. It's definitely something you can actually cook with quite hard. Blastoise. I think back to B+ tier still. I think Surf Hydro Pump is very annoying, and this Unite move will always have a good amount of impact. It used to be able to play Central Area, but sadly those times are quite over, and I can't recommend Central Area Blastoise anymore. Clefable. Clefable is like a counter pick. You don't want to pick Clefable unless the enemies have something annoying. I'm gonna put it into the B+ tier. It mainly is just a counter pick. I think Ninetales is quite solid. B+, I'm not sure if it should be higher than that though. And in Central Area, I mean, I personally like Ninetales Central Area with Veil and Gleam. I think it has a lot of potential, but it does I feel like it does miss just a bit of power there. And of course, it's quite good in top and bot path. Early levels, right? Level 6 for your strong move, and then also level 4 first evolution with good basic abilities. So it always feels kind of a waste, right, to put Ninetales into the Central Area, but it can definitely be quite good. Wigglytuff, I think, is also quite decent in the current meta. It's good with Darkrai, it's good against Darkrai. I can definitely recommend it as a solid B+ Pokemon. Slowbro, I think A is fair. It's just a very solid tank defender, right? Always its Unite move is good. It will never be bad, I feel like, so yeah. It's just a good Pokemon. Maybe even A+, right? Slowbro is just Slowbro. If the enemies have a Pokemon that's too strong, you pick Slowbro, and suddenly you have a chance of winning the game. I think Machamp is actually pretty decent right now, but still missed that tiny bit to be into A tier. But I think Machamp is back to like being a solid B+ Pokemon. In Central Area though, I can't really recommend it all too much, but I think it's still better than the ones at the bottom, so I'm going to put it into C tier. Sylveon has fallen off a lot, but I think B tier is still quite fair for it. And in Central Area though, it has fallen even further into also C tier. I really can't recommend too much. I mean, you can play Mystical Fire, Central Area Sylveon, definitely, but I can't recommend it all too much. Then we have Blissey, which I think is currently an S tier Pokemon, one of the best healing supports in the entire game. Really does a lot. You can also go Safeguard into certain comps with certain teammates, and it's really very versatile. Very strong healer that almost never disappoints. Pretty much never, like, it's just a good pick. Mamoswine, I don't know, Mamoswine is weird now. I feel after the nerfs, I feel like I can't put into A anymore, even though maybe it should be there. But I think, yeah, maybe honestly still probably A. It's just annoying, even though it got nerfed for some reason, but they nerfed Icicle Crash, which wasn't even played much, right? So the nerfs really didn't matter all too much. Greedent goes into A+ now, with a Covet Badge being one of the highest win rate movesets in the entire game. Decidueye in lane top C tier. It can be played sometimes, And in central area, I think B is fair. It's quite squishy, it's very easily to be taken down, and again, there's a lot of annoying Pokemon in the current meta that Decidueye struggles with. Next up, Dragonite, of course, terrible top and bot path Pokemon. It just takes way too long, but I think in central area with Hyper Beam, it's still very solid. I don't know if it's A+ though, I definitely think maybe, I think A is probably more fair. Outrage definitely feels nerfed, Hyper Beam is still good, but also doesn't get too much done every single time. So I think A is quite fair for this Pokemon. Next up, Serena is currently back in A, but just because it's bugged. Its Unite move works on unstoppable targets again. After that is gone, it probably goes back into B+ tier. And then we have Serena in central area, which I'm not a big fan of, wouldn't recommend, because it really needs to stack your attack rate before it becomes useful. Trevenant, easily A+ or maybe S tier over Defender. Very strong Pokemon, very annoying, stuns so much, has incredible sustain. Laning phase, of course, can be a bit difficult until level 5. But after level 5, it's very strong. Aegis Slash is absolutely horrible. I'm gonna put into D tier. I just can't recommend playing this Pokemon currently anywhere. It's just every time I pick it, I regret it for a very good reason. Then we have Hoopa, which in my opinion is also still S tier. Healing support is very good in general. That's definitely something you kind of want to have maybe on your team. Then we have Duraludon, which is okay, but nothing I'm a big fan of in general. Also, like, literally no one plays this Pokemon. It's very hard to judge how strong it really is. I'm just going to put it into B tier in both top pot and central area. Next up, Azumarill. If it was for my personal bias, I would probably into B+, but I think Azumarill definitely is around the B tier Pokemon as well. It can struggle very much in the current meta, and in central area, I really cannot recommend Azumarill all too much, but I think C tier, maybe for a Whirlpool player of central area build, is actually not the absolute worst. Espeon, I feel like, with Psyshock, Psybeam is very underrated and very strong. Definitely in central area, also quite mid right now. Stored Power Psybeam is okay if you play central area, but nothing all too crazy anymore like it used to be. Delphox has fallen off, I feel like, a good amount, with all the nerfs it receives randomly as well. I think B is still quite fair for it, and in central area as well. I'm also not the biggest fan of Delphox anymore. But yeah, again, attacker Pokemon are not the best, but I think B tier is still quite fair for Delphox, just because it has a lot of broken mechanics, right? Fire Spin, its Unite move are still very powerful. Glaceon and Path, I think B tier is fine. It's not the absolute best top and bot path Pokemon, but definitely gets the work done as well. And in central area, I'm gonna put it into A tier. Buzzwole is just... people are gonna be mad that I don't put him high, but Buzzwole just doesn't win games really. But I do think it's not all too bad. It's also counter to Greedent, so I'm gonna put it into B tier. If the enemies have a Greedent, if you play Superpower or Leech Life, I think as well, you can actually stop Covet completely from happening, which of course is quite good as a counter pick towards Greedent, which I feel like I can kind of put into this as well. But in central area, definitely would not recommend Buzzwole a single bit. Tyranitar in Path is the absolute bottom tier. You can have some lucky games if you have an XP Shalane partner, but that's kind of about it. And in central area, I think B tier is also quite fair. It's just middle of the pack, I would say. Mew is the topic that's always quite scuffed, like in tournaments, Mew's up here. In general, I would say, again, for the majority of the player base who watches these games, who are not playing tournaments, Mew is definitely a B+ Pokemon. Nothing all too crazy. And in central area, probably also maybe like B or C. Again, if this was towards tournament play, Mew would be like A+ or A tier, but since tournament players are not going to watch my tier list, for what reason, right? They should play, they should know anyways what is good and what is bad. If you play solo queue, if you play duos, then Mew is still definitely just around B+ tier. Not the biggest fan of Scyther, but he's definitely quite alright. B tier in top and bot path, and also maybe even A tier. No, actually, probably also B tier when it comes to central area. If you're good at Scyther, he's definitely higher. Otherwise, he's just around a just normal Pokemon. Dodrio is still very frustrating of a Pokemon to deal with. I think it's quite decent. Gonna put it into A tier over here, and also A+ in central area. I think that is quite fair. It can lane quite well, actually. It has good last hitting, good mobility for stacking early on, so definitely good. Scizor has definitely seen better days, like definitely. It feels such a struggle to play Scizor. Scizor is kind of like what Jake would call the Goodra effect. It's good against like bad players that just fight it non-stop for some reason. Besides that, Scizor is just an absolute mid Pokemon right now, and I definitely would not really recommend it. Of course, you can have pop-off games with any of these characters, because Unite is a way where you get sometimes matched against players not of your skill, right? and you can just have absolutely crazy game with any of these Pokemon. So just because you see Aegislash and D tier doesn't mean you can't have like crazy games on it or good win rate. If you play something a lot, you can definitely also have a good win rate with any of these D tier Pokemon. Sableye personally, I think is a solid B or B plus support. I'm definitely, of course, a bit different, right, of a Pokemon. So yeah, Sableye needs a bit of understanding on how to play it, but it's very frustrating of a Pokemon. Zoroark in Path, I don't think is all that crazy currently. I definitely prefer, I think it's much better in Cinderaria than it is in Top and Bot Path. But Zoroark is still just frustrating. It's just a frustrating Pokemon to deal with. It also got a buff. I do think A and A plus fits it quite well for Cinderaria and Top and Bot Path. Then what we have next, the Urshifu. So, Surging Strikes, yes, I know Overlord won a tournament on Surging Strikes. Doesn't make it necessarily a good bid for the rest of the player base. In Cinderaria, maybe it's still B tier then, I guess. But I'm really not a big fan of Surging Strikes Urshifu. Its win rate is absolutely atrocious. So I can't recommend you playing it unless you Overlord. Again, Overlord, he won a tournament playing Surging Strikes Urshifu. That doesn't mean that it's good for the rest of the player base, just straight up. Wicked Blow Urshifu is actually not the worst right now. I do think it could also be in B tier when it comes to laning. It's just, if you have an XP share lane partner, it's up here. If you don't, which most of the time will happen, it's definitely in C or D tier, so I'm gonna just go by that. But if you have someone with XP share with solid early game, you can actually pick Wicked Blow Urshifu in Top and Bot Path. And in Cinderaria currently, it's either S or A plus tier, but I think A plus is still a bit more fair. Next up, we have Dragapult, which of course joins Cinderace down at the bottom right here. And I think in Cinderaria, just a solid B tier right now. Nothing all too crazy. Comfey, I think, is a very disgusting Pokemon, going to A+. All the supports are so strong, actually, all the healing supports. Goodra with the buffs is still an absolutely C tier Pokemon. Nothing has changed about that. I like sometimes like playing Goodra in Cinderaria, but it just feels frustrating to play Goodra. It just needs some bit of different buffs. I personally like Lapras a lot. I think Lapras is back to A tier when it comes to the Top and Bot Path. And I do think it's going to still see more and more play over the next few weeks when people realize that's actually quite decent. Zacian with the nerfs, I don't know where to put it now. Zacian is for me difficult to rank. I think I want to put it into A for now, but it could also be A+. And in Cinderaria, I'm definitely also going to go into the A+ tier. Chenlu feels like a pain to play right now, but it doesn't deserve C tier. I think B tier and both are totally fine. It just gets dove very easily. Imprison, though, is a good counter to most things. So with Imprison, you can still definitely get some work done. Umbreon, easily S tier Pokemon. Currently, it just does everything. It's like if your team comp needs something, you just pick Umbreon. You have a healer, you have a defender, engage, stunner, good early game. Broke mechanic of stealing shields. It is just a overpowered Pokemon. In my opinion, Leafeon is still S tier with Razor Leaf and Aerial Ace. It is just, yeah, S tier in both. It's just so strong. I really want this build to be nerfed 100%. Inteleon, I feel like I've always put him a bit too high on my tier list, I'm going to be very honest. It is very difficult to carry games with Inteleon, so I'm going to drop it down to A tier, which I think is still, just because of Water Gun being broken, of an early game last hit is still a good choice. And in Cinderaria also going into A tier, as again, attacker Pokemon are not the best. Mewtwo X has dropped a lot. Really doesn't feel up too good. Like, I pretty much never see anyone play Mewtwo X. But people play Mewtwo Y. So Mewtwo Y is either S or A+. I think A+ is still a bit more fair for it. And yeah, Mewtwo X in Cinderaria I cannot recommend currently. Maybe C tier though. And Jungle Mewtwo Y doesn't feel all too great. I really don't like it, but it's probably still also A+ tier there too. Blaziken is hard to judge where I should put it, really. It's very difficult. I think in Cinderaria I definitely put it into S tier. In Top and Bot Path, maybe A+. I feel like, I don't know if I can put it into S. It is very strong though. Like, Blaziken is super good. It just also does everything. It's kind of like the all-rounder Umbreon. Except it can't heal, of course, allies, but it's very versatile. It can do a lot. And I do think laning phase can be sometimes very rough, especially if you have a bad lane partner. But Blaziken is absolutely a top-tier Pokemon. Mimikyu in Path. Now that Trick Room is played as well, I'm actually going to put it higher, because Trick Room is getting more popular, and a Trick Room doesn't need as much experience as Shadow Sneak. So for Top and Bot Path, it's definitely much higher now. And in Cinderaria, S tier, definitely. I mean, the Shadow Sneak in Cinderaria with Play Rough is still one of the best movesets in the entire game. Super frustrating. Muscarada is always just a solid A tier. I would say, in both when it comes to jungling and also to top and bot path. Maybe even A+ in Cent. No, actually, let's put it A as well. I think it's just a solid speedster that does a lot of things and gets away with things very easily too. Metagross, I'm gonna put down to the B+ tier. It has also seen better days for sure. And in Centraria also in B. I like playing Metagross a lot. I think it's a fine Pokemon, but of course, there's currently things that are just a tiny bit better. But if you like Metagross, definitely a good Pokemon. Gyarados, I think A tier when it comes to top and bot path. Of course, Centraria shouldn't recommend, even though you get Gyarados evolution after the first jungle clear. It just takes a bit too long, and you kind of waste having a jungle Pokemon at that point. Miraidon with the nerfs doesn't really matter, I think. It's still S tier in both. I don't think it matters too much. It's just, Electro Drift is so stupid, right? Like, it just straight up is one of the best things in the entire game. And if it's rough to play Electro Drift, you can still go Charge Beam and just get as much done. Failings, I think back into, again, B+, due to, I think it's quite underrated. If you like Failings, you can definitely play it again. And even in Centraria, I think it's much better than people give it credit for. Gonna put it into B there as well. Cerulege is hard to judge when it comes to top and bot path now. But I do think probably still into A tier. Well, I mean, Cerulege is still a great Pokemon, I think. Like, you can still get a lot of done. It's still a lot of tournament play. So A in top and bot path and A+ in Centraria. Ho-Oh. Yeah, I mean, Ho-Oh I think is still A, but I can't really put it higher than that. Its Revive is broken, but the rest of Ho-Oh is not all too great right now. And it has also seen, of course, better days. I mean, it just received some more nerfs, so well, not on this patch, but on the patches before, definitely has fallen off. Armarouge has also fallen off a good amount, but I don't really know where to place it. I think maybe, I feel like A, it's still just, I mean, it's still better than the other attacker, maybe. I think A is fine, and then A+ in Centraria, of course. In Centraria gets a lot of experience, so it just skates a bit harder, and this late game is quite good. Darkrai, I would still say is S tier. I think so, but like, I need more time. The problem is that everyone bans Darkrai right now still, so it's very hard to judge how Darkrai will be. It could be lower over the next few weeks, but it's definitely not God tier anymore. It is not God tier. Psyduck now. Psyduck could be a God tier Pokemon, but just because it's a support, it has a crazy win rate currently of 57%. So Psyduck has to be banned and ranked, has to be picked. It is absolutely broken of a Pokemon. Currently the highest win rate one by a good margin. I don't know how accurate that win rate is really about Psyduck. Most players don't have it unlocked yet, so people who like to pay, maybe playing pre-mates, they make the win rate seem higher than it actually is. We're gonna see how Psyduck turns out once the majority of the player base gets to Psyduck. But Psyduck has potentially of being the current God tier Pokemon on the current patch. Surf, Disable, or Bubble Beam Disable is super, super strong, and you get so much done. I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list. Again, always let me know what you agree, what you disagree with, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!